Hi, and welcome back to the Happiness Safari podcast. My name is Nadine. I'm your host and a Bikram Yoga travel teacher, a happiness life coach, and I'm here to help you to live a happier and healthier life. On most podcasts, you hear interviews of rich and successful or famous people. And yes, you hear their stories, and it's interesting to hear. But does that mean only famous people are worth being interviewed and sharing their stories? And does that mean we can only learn from rich people? Does it mean success equals happiness? I believe not. That's why I interview people like you or me to show you that you don't have to become famous or rich to be happy. You can define what happiness means to you. On today's episode, I talked to Kasham from the US. She left home at the young age of 14 and found her happiness in a children's home where she experienced being loved and cared for the first time. She began healing work at the age of 18 with therapeutic massages. She lived in the US, Haiti, South Korea, and Portugal, sharing her gifts there. She's able to reach into the depth using her strong intuition to create a safe space for personal transformation. In Peru, she was initiated as a Curandera, which means healer, and was given permission to serve medicine as a sacred form of healing. She feels honored to do this work to help you identify your roadblocks, heal, raise your vibrations, transform, and live your best life now. Kasham experienced a lot of trauma in her life, but today she's living her best life in Portugal, truly content with her life and her past. We speak about forgiveness and why it is important to accept people for who they are and not for who we want them to be, especially our parents. We speak about verbal and emotional abuse and how to get out of an abusive relationship. Also, what you can do if you have a friend or you know someone who is in an abusive relationship. From today's episode, you will also learn how to heal your traumas, how to forgive yourself and others, why gratitude practice can change your life, how you can recognize if you are in an abusive relationship, why your parents always act and do the best they can, why you can be grateful for all the experiences you had. And I really hope you enjoy this interview and Kasham will inspire you. Hi and welcome everyone to the Happiness Safari podcast. Today I'm speaking to Kasham Laîné from the States, but she lives in Portugal, and I'm so happy to have you and to talk to you today about your happiness journey. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and who you are?
Sure. We'll do it in a nutshell because obviously there's so much to me. Well, I am, like you mentioned, I'm from the States, but I currently live in Portugal. I just moved here a few months ago, just 3 months ago. And I am living my best life here. I've lived abroad in South Korea, as well as Haiti. So this is my next adventure. And I'm excited to be here.
Wow, that sounds like an exciting journey. So I want to hear more about that. So when would you say, at what point in your life did your own kind of journey towards happiness start?
Wow. Well, I would say, in order to answer that, I need to give a brief background. So I left home when I was 14 and a half, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I guess my happiness journey began then because I realized that that wasn't the environment that I wanted to be in, and I wanted to seek a different environment. So I moved around a lot as a teenager, and then I actually ended up in a children's home, and that really changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I'm so grateful for that particular place because I began to turn things around and really start to find my happiness then. So I would say my late teens is when it really began. And as the years have gone by, I've just leaned into it and discovered self-love, and that has astronomically helped my happiness.
Wow, can imagine. But wow, just
going back. I mean, that must have been very, very difficult at such a young age to leave home. And then, I mean, what exactly did you do? Did you have, other family or friends, or did you just pack your bag and left the state, or how did you do it?
Yeah, well, I basically sat down with my mom and we had a discussion about it, and she agreed that I could go. And so what I did was I started living with different friends. So I lived with a friend for a while, just a month or two, and then she wasn't really satisfied with me living there. Um, I this is this is the catalyst. I got a tattoo, and she thought it was the place I was living. So she didn't agree for me to live there anymore. Then I moved in with my childhood best friend and her family. Lived there for a bit, and then eventually she discovered this children's home in Oklahoma. I'm originally from Kansas, and she discovered a children's home in Oklahoma, and we discussed it, and that's where I ended up going.
Wow. And then how long did you stay there?
I stayed there until I was 17. I tried to reintegrate back into her home. But as we know, when only one party changes, it doesn't work. So I had made major changes in my life, but unfortunately the home environment hadn't. So that was short-lived. And so then I moved in with my high school sweetheart's parents to finish high school. And then I started university and moved into that university dorm. So,
yeah. Wow. Yeah. And what transformation have you done in that time in that children's home? Like, what happened?
I guess the short version is I really had a home unit where I had two parental figures, and they really showed me what it meant to be in a healthy, happy relationship. Of course, there were challenges, there were arguments, but it was never violent. It was never, ugly. They fought healthy way, and that really showed me a great example of healthy relationships. It made me feel safe. They trusted me without really having given them a reason to. And that was a huge catalyst in my life because I wasn't used to being trusted. And so that really turned things around. So I just kind of changed.
Wow. So
the power of love.
Wow. Could you then change through that positive experience, probably your negative perceptions of life and relationships and family you had before?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of healing took place, right? Because so much is about perspective and forgiveness, even if that other person is not sorry for the things that they did. So that was a good lesson in life early on, but it's one that I've carried with me for sure into adulthood.
Okay, so speaking about forgiveness, so did you then forgive your family, even though, they didn't feel like sorry? Did you forgive them for yourself? Because I feel a lot of people think that they have to forgive for the other person, and then they are like, no, but they don't deserve that I forgive them. But I think the important thing is to forgive for yourself so you can let go and you can move on, and it has actually nothing to do with the other person. They don't even have to know, right?
Absolutely. I think, I don't know who to quote or to give the quote to, but, people often say unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. When we don't have forgiveness, we are poisoning ourselves. And so forgiveness is not about the other person. It's not about excusing their behavior or making it okay, or even necessarily allowing them back into your life. Forgiveness is about letting go of the desire to seek revenge or to seek punishment for the other person. And so when I was able to do that, I also then had to forgive myself, right? Forgive myself for the negative self-talk that I was accepting, that I was saying to myself, and also for allowing myself to believe the things that I had heard that were not necessarily truth. So forgiveness was both toward the other people and for myself, for allowing myself to believe those truths.
Yeah. And that's probably the hardest part, right? I mean, where it all starts is to forgive yourself, because we are always so hard on ourselves, and usually probably the ones we forgive the last. So we should actually start with forgiving ourselves. And and was there any resistance at the start, or did you just, I guess, when you learned that, or you just decided to, or how was that process? Just thinking if somebody is listening to and has trouble to forgive, like, to help them to.
The process that I went through personally was I wrote things down and kind of wrote my grievances, and specifically started with my father, and I just kind of wrote him a letter. I actually ended up sending it to him, but when I'm doing coaching with other people, I often say sometimes people don't need to hear what you have to say because they can't receive it. And there's nothing productive that will come upon it. But if you feel like you have to get it out, writing it down, or just speaking it into the earth, because energy has creative power. And when you release that, you're still releasing it, even if they can't hear it. People sometimes cannot receive what you have to say. They may not be in a place where they can acknowledge or even receive the words that you have for them, even if it's truth. So it's important to still release it so you don't stuff it, right? And push it down. So in my particular situation, I did write a letter and I did send it to him. He did not receive it, and that's okay. I still released what I had to say. And so that was very healing for me. Later in life, I actually have a really good relationship with my mom now. And I think a major shift that happened with that, and such a good principle, especially for those of us who are trying to forgive, particularly our parents, is that I decided to accept her for who she is and not who I wished she would be or I wish she would have done, but accept her for who she is. And I made the conscious decision to love her for who she is. And that's not always easy, depending on your circumstances, but it is something that majorly shifted our relationship because I changed my own perspective about it. Again, not dismissing what happened or, the circumstances, but allowing forgiveness to take place and then moving forward because I did want a relationship and I do want a relationship with my mom. So I made that conscious decision to have one.
Yeah, wow. I think that's super powerful, changing your perspective, but also accepting her for who she was, because of who she is, because actually, I mean, what we cannot do is change our past anyway. And I feel often we don't agree with like how our life went and, some circumstances and the way we've been, brought up, or we want to change that and we want to change, our parents or whatever happened to us, but we can never change that. So there's no point in even holding on to that, right? And then what you can change is your perspective and actually your perception, just accepting that the past is the past and the people are, who they are, and then making your peace with that.
Yeah.
But I also think in our parents, I guess they always act in their best interest. So even though, I mean, you don't see it and you don't understand their behavior and you don't agree and you're like, this is not a loving behavior sometimes, but I feel they still always do the best they can. And I feel like, like there's always a form of love. Like even if there's violence, it's because they like probably experience that themselves and they express it, like in that way because that's all they know, like how to, I don't know, connect or behave. But I feel like every parent is still trying their very best to raise their children. And that doesn't have to be aligned with like what, you think is right or society or, we would think. is right, but to know that, I guess.
That's exactly right. Louise Hay, I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's passed now, but she has Hay House production, and wonderful, magnificent woman who helped heal people and help them on their own healing journeys. One of her principles: your parents did the best that they knew how. And that is so key. And it was so key for me because even if they didn't know how, they did the best that they knew how, which is brilliant because they were doing the best that they had learned or that they knew. Again, not necessarily your standard of, what should have been or what should be, what was, but they truly did try to do their best according to what they knew and what they knew how, which allows you to give so much more grace.
Yeah. Wow. And then how did your journey continue after, I guess, you went to college? Or was there another kind of key moment which, you want to share?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, I would say. I ended up in an abusive marriage, actually, and that was also a catalyst to my change when I was able to remove myself from that relationship. Interestingly, it's one of the things that I had to really delve into and heal through my own life because it was the only abusive relationship that I had ever been in, besides my childhood. One that I chose that I didn't realize I was choosing. And, I didn't realize it was abusive until it was abusive. So I had to really, once removed from that situation, reflect upon how I attracted that to my life and why I became involved in that type of relationship and how I can avoid that in the future.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge catalyst for healing and change as well. And I just believe that every circumstance in our life is a puzzle piece that helps bring us along our journey and can be such a beautiful thing, even out of tragedy.
Wow, that's very inspiring. But then how do you think you attracted it when you reflected on it later? Have you?
Yeah, I've certainly reflected on that. Well, a few things. One, as I've dove into my ancestral lineage and sort of the spiritual side of that, I understand that it was a connection that I still had unresolved that I needed to resolve. And thus changing the cycle of my lineage going forward, which is quite a beautiful thing. But as another note, I was unfortunately naive. I got married very young. And because I had kind of grown up so fast, I was very mature for my age. So I really believed that I was ready to be married. And honestly, I was ready to be married. I just didn't choose correctly. Unfortunately, I didn't have the guidance to kind of see some of the things looking back now that are like, well, there's a imbalance of power here. For example, his age and my age were quite a gap. And so there was an imbalance of power, which naturally lends itself to be abusive. And don't hear me say that, a big age gap always creates abuse. That's not the case. But when there is an imbalance of power that comes with a huge age gap, oftentimes it's easy to slip into those roles. And, it's been said that we often choose our caregivers. Women choose their fathers, men choose their mothers, but I believe we choose a combination of our caregivers. And so I was just continuing that until it's been healed. And since it's been healed, now I can choose differently.
Yeah, nice. And how did you get out of that? What was helping you, or was a key moment there, like that you noticed and you ended it?
Well, an interesting point that I have been reflecting on this week actually is abuse is abuse. And sometimes when you grow up in an abusive situation, you have a picture of what abuse is. So for me, he never punched me in my face. Okay. And this is what abuse was to me. And so the measures that he took, even though he was physical, because he never directly punched me in my face, which was my standard of abuse, I thought, well, I'm not being abused. I don't have it so bad. And what's important for anyone in a domestic violence situation to realize is verbal abuse is abuse, emotional abuse is abuse, physical abuse obviously is abuse, but sometimes we have these distortions about what abuse is. And so I had a good friend who, I was living abroad at the time. I had a good friend who wanted to help me get out, so to speak. But it wasn't the right time. We ended up moving to the States, and things had escalated from there. So I was able to really realize, like, I've got to remove myself from this situation, or it's could become deadly. So yeah, I began the process, and as things have it, the puzzle pieces came together that I was able to get out, and it wasn't easy. I then experienced stalking situation and ended up having to move out of the state. But eventually I made it out safely, and now I'm happy and healthy.
Wow. And I'm very, very happy that you are.
Yeah.
And yeah. So what would you recommend women in kind of abusive relationship as you described, and maybe at the stage where they don't even realize if there's something? I mean, now you described it, but
yeah,
I think you waited until it got really bad. But like, if somebody is in it and is actually wondering, am I in an abusive relationship, or, like, and so they don't have to wait until it escalates, what would you recommend them?
Yeah. So there's a great thing on the internet called the Wheel of Power. And it basically has layers of abuse and ways that people can recognize it. Things like name calling, public criticism, and humiliation. These kind of things are abuse. Unfortunately, women don't get out until they're ready to get out. And, well, men and women, because men experience domestic violence as well. Yeah. We know statistically that women far more. But it does happen with both genders and through not just heteronormative situations, right? Yeah. So what I would recommend to someone is find a safe space, a safe friend that can help you escape, because actually the most dangerous time for a domestic violence situation is the time of leaving. Okay. Yeah. It actually escalates the situation when the abuser feels like they are losing control. And so it's very important to have a plan and to have a support system that can help you. That's especially difficult because abusers tend to remove you from your support system and isolate you from your support system. So I would more so speak to the friends of people who suspect that their friends might be being abused. And what they should do is write down dates and times and conversations that they may have had with their friend, because most of the time, victims do not alert the authorities. And then when it's time to leave and the situation has escalated, the officials can't do too much because there's no paper trail. So it's quite a dangerous situation, but it is possible to get out safely.
Wow. Wow. But I think that's a super, super good recommendation for people. So if you're listening and you know anybody feel like it's in an abusive relationship, it can be a friend or family member, then I guess, yeah, doing that, like noting, writing down when you get a phone call or when you see them together and you notice whatever form of abuse. And I guess also maybe, I mean, reaching out to the person. So let's say they have some, I mean, friends left or support system or family, like telling them, making them aware. Yeah, you notice that something is wrong and there is a way out, and they could be like helping them to make a plan to escape, or offer your help, I guess, to be there. That'd be the right thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also scary for friends to get involved, because then they put themselves and their families and lives and situations in danger, right? So it's just unfortunately a cycle that's very hard to break. And I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for people in those situations.
And now you work with like people who got out of situations like that, or what's your main focus?
Well, my main focus, I also do life coaching, and it has a spirit-led, intuitive factor with it. And I mostly work with people to help, heal and address their traumas, and be led by spirit to guide and direct how to basically live their best life. So I have worked with people in abusive situations, but it's not my main focus.
Okay. But I think, I mean, you have the expertise. So if somebody is listening and who was in a situation like that, maybe you still need some healing to get over that, or also maybe forgive that, then you would be probably the right person, to work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Is there another part of your story you feel you really want to share with the world?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the trauma and the kind of big negative events, but what is so important is I was in an abusive relationship 20 years ago. I got out 21 years ago, and so my whole life is different now. There is life, there's beautiful life beyond trauma, there's beautiful life beyond abuse and really crappy situations. there really is beautiful life beyond that. And so I think it's really important to share those things. As you walk through your healing journey, it's not all roses and butterflies. There are setbacks. There are things that come up that you realize, oh, I haven't truly healed this, or I haven't truly made it through this issue or situation that I have. And the beautiful thing is to have the emotional awareness to recognize things and then begin addressing them as you continue on your healing journey.
Wow, yeah. So tell us, how is your life now? So how have the last 20 years been, and what's the beautiful side of it? Because I think, that's very, very important what you say when we are in a difficult situation or we experience trauma. And I know that myself, then you feel this is how my life is, and this is how my life will be forever, and I cannot get over it, and there's no point in even continuing, or you don't really see a compelling future because you cannot imagine that life is different on the other side. So please tell us how your life is on the other side.
I went to school. I finished my education. I was the first in my family to get a master's degree. Wow. So I'm very proud of that, because it is an accomplishment, but also a moving forward. And, it's just a milestone. It's not who I am, but it's a part of who I am. So I finished my education. I started working with traumatized youth and helping them work through the issues. I worked in corrections for a while. I've fortunately done a lot of work to be able to share and help others heal as well. I've been able to make my life what I want it to be. So I think the beautiful thing is that your childhood or the traumas that you're currently going through don't dictate who you become or how you change or what your life can be, even though you may not be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel at the moment. It doesn't mean that your life can't be completely different. As I mentioned earlier, I've lived abroad. I've visited 24 new countries and repeated several of them. I've been able to just travel and live my best life, make friends that have been lifelong friendships all over the world. And I'm just really grateful for my life. I always say that I wouldn't wish my traumas in childhood and the bad experiences on anyone. But I also can appreciate that they've made me the resilient, kind, compassionate, loving person that I am. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think, it's beautiful that you are actually grateful for that and you turn that around, and I feel I can feel from talking to you that you're a very kind and compassionate person. You kind of make me cry a little bit. So and I think that's also beautiful, like to know what you can be and like what also inspiration you can be for others if you push through and if you go through difficult times and if you know that there is a way out and you believe in yourself and you keep believing in that future, and your life can always turn around and be different no matter like where you come from and what you experience. And I think you're a living example of that. So that's
thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh.
So being able to create your own life really is a beautiful thing, and everyone has the power to do it. Once we realize that, our life will truly change.
Yeah. At the end of the podcast, I always ask the same 3 questions. And the first is, what does happiness mean to you?
Happiness is having peace and protecting your own energy and recognizing that you make your own happiness. Circumstances don't. And no matter what the circumstances are around you, happiness comes from within, not the external circumstances.
And what do you do to be happy?
I have a lot of practices.
Share, please share.
I one of my taglines is that gratitude is the key to happiness. So gratitude and giving are the key to happiness. So I have a gratitude practice that I practice every day. When I wake up and before I go to bed, I give gratitude. And I try, and I'm successful at seeing the positive side of things and really stepping into other people's perspective so that when things aren't so happy, I can try and see another perspective. So I also do a lot of self-care, meditation. I've recently, and this is a beautiful way that I've leaned into self-love, is I sing to myself, and I sing to myself when I cook food for myself. And it's such a beautiful experience because I don't have a good singing voice, but because I'm sharing love with myself, it brings me joy and happiness. And oftentimes it moves me to tears because I'm so grateful to be loved. And of course, it starts from within. And that is what I do for my own happiness.
Yeah. Wow. I think that's super, super beautiful. And interesting, because I feel like many people probably think that they don't have a nice singing voice, but then if you allow yourself to sing in the car, under the shower, but when you're cooking, like I like that as well. Like, that's beautiful. And
because you're putting that loving energy into the food, and it creates that vibration so that when you're consuming it, it literally gets inside of you, which is beautiful.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last question is, what was the happiest moment in your life?
Wow. There are so many. I don't know if I can choose one. I don't know that I can honestly choose one. I will say a recent one that brought me to tears is I've just moved to Portugal, as I mentioned earlier, and I was driving my car in the countryside, and it gets me emotional now because I was just so grateful at what a beautiful life I have. And I was very integral part of creating that life. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, like, I'm so grateful to just be able to live the life that I have. And yeah, I think there are so many moments of happiness in my life. Fortunately, it's hard to just choose one, but that's definitely a recent one that stands out to me.
Yeah, wow, amazing. I think that's very connected to gratitude again, right? And experiencing that and allowing yourself to really feel it. And I think also gratitude, I mean, is a practice to say, like, you are, grateful in the morning and the evening, but it's not something the human brain does automatically. That I feel like that's a good example. When you practice it, then also these moments come naturally when you experience a moment where you actually kind of should be or can be grateful for. Then you also really, really feel it, where, probably at that day there were hundreds of other people driving the same road and not feeling grateful for it, right? So again, it's like your inner state and attitude towards life. And I love that. I had many moments like that in Portugal, so it is definitely a magical place. I mean,
it is. Yeah. I'm so grateful to be here.
Is there any book you read which really inspired you and you would like to recommend?
This book doesn't really have to do with happiness, but it definitely is a book I always recommend. And it's a book called The 5 Love Languages. It's by Gary Chapman. I read it for the first time in the late 90s. And the original book is geared toward marriage and how one receives and expresses love. And any intelligent person can apply it to every area of your life. And since it's been a wildly successful book, and so there's lots of different versions for singles, for the military, for parents, whatever version suits your needs. But the premise is basically learning how to love other people and express care for other people in a way that's meaningful for them, and to help identify for your own self that you can help teach other people how to love you.
I read that book as well, and I think it's super powerful, because it's just knowing that, right? And that awareness, again, having what love languages you or others speak, and that goes exactly now. Also, I mean, I think they are even for children, and I think for yourself even, and you can use it with friends. And I'll put that in the show notes. Oh my God, it was so lovely to talk to you. Very inspiring.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and thank you for transforming your life in that way, and living your best life and inspiring others to do the same. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like the podcast, please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues, and rate or review it. Hit the subscribe button. It helps podcasts so much. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you listening and sharing. Please leave a comment on my Instagram at NadineAnneYoga and let me know the one thing you take away for yourself. After my yoga classes, I always read a quote to my students, and they love it so much that I decided to read one for you at the end of every episode. So here we go. Grant yourself a moment of peace. and you will understand how foolish you have scurried about. Learn to be silent, and you will notice that you have talked too much. Be kind, and you will realize that your judgment of others was too severe. That was an ancient Chinese proverb. I hope you enjoyed that. And I wish you a lovely day, no matter where in the world you are. Have a fantastic rest of the week. Love and namaste.